when you wake up in the morning, you have something to do. Is there a coherence? Is there a purpose? Everyone needs to have a purpose, and everyone could have a different one. If you've got something that you get up in the morning, you say, I've got something to do, that is critical for all of us. Nobody is ready to just, in a sense, do nothing all day.
Hey, this is Rob. Welcome to I Am Pain Free Podcast. Today is really a fun event because we have Dr. Leonard Jason on today, and he is really exciting. He's a professor from DePaul University, and he's been at DePaul for 50 years, but he's an amazing researcher, and he's helping people a lot with CFS, or chronic fatigue syndrome. He calls it MECFS. So you have to be real excited to listen to the rest of this conversation. He talks about 4 key items that you really need to pay attention to in order to, one, help yourself and or help your loved ones who are struggling with any of these things. So hang on tight. We got Dr. Leonard coming up. Hey, welcome back to I Am Pain Free Podcast. Today is going to be really informational. We have an amazing guest with us. It's Dr. Leonard Jason. How are you, Doc?
Very good, and feel free to call me Leonard.
Sounds good, Leonard. I appreciate that. I'm very excited to have this conversation. You've just got such an incredible background, and you've been working in this field for a really long time. So I'm going to learn a lot. I love learning. I think our guests that follow along and listen to us are going to learn a ton as well. So why don't you just give us a real quick background of yourself, and then how did you get into what you're doing today?
So around 1990, it became very apparent, this is about 35 years ago, that a lot of people were complaining about what they called at that time CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. And the CDC was getting 4,000 phone calls a month from people.
Wow.
And so something was up, and yet the self-help organization was pretty large too. And yet the CDC came out with prevalence estimates that suggested there were less than 20,000 people in this country with the illness. And what struck me was that if something is a relatively uncommon illness, it's not going to get a lot of attention or resources.
Right.
So myself and a colleague of mine at the University of Illinois, I'm at DePaul University,
Okay.
and working on a prevalence study. We call it epidemiology. And if you can believe it, it took almost 10 years for us to get the pilot work, get NIH funding, able to do the collection of literally calling thousands and thousands of people and coming up with some new estimates. The way we did it was, rather than what the CDC did, was have several different places get referrals from folks to make a decision as to who had it. But if you're not in the healthcare system, you're not going to get referred. And if physicians don't believe, they're skeptical of the illness, they're not going to refer either. We wanted to go directly to the people, so we contacted people directly without physician gatekeepers. And our estimates were that there were, rather than 20,000, probably closer to 800,000 to 1 million.
Wow.
So
that's a lot. That's a big difference.
So that kind of was our first effort in the 1990s, and then in the 2000, 2010, and up till the present, we've been doing really just a lot of basic research concerning things like the name, which is somewhat trivializing chronic fatigue syndrome. So they now refer to it as myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue syndrome. I'll refer to it as MECFS.
Okay. Okay. Can you mind explaining what that word? What does that for the seat? What ME? What does that mean? I have not heard that term before. I maybe seen the MECFS, but I didn't know what it meant. Now I have an expert to help us. What does that mean?
So it's really encephalopathy is brain.
Okay.
Kind of pathology. Itis is inflammation. So really, they're talking about some type of brain inflammation. And if you call the illness myalgic encephalomyelitis, what we found is that basically people tend to think of it as more serious and more disabling. If you call it just something like chronic fatigue syndrome, it's considered less important, less impactful. So that's why the name counts. And we did research on that after our prevalence research. And since then, we've been doing research also on post-exertional malaise, which is one of the key symptoms of this illness. And we've tried to define it. What that means is that you exercise or you have some activity or exertion, and you have the disproportionate amount of feeling ill and feeling sick.
Interesting.
It's almost like you have a poison in your body, and it's not just running a marathon and feeling fatigue. It's a very different experience. So we've been trying to measure that symptom for a number of years.
Gotcha. And that happens after they exercise is what sparks that?
Actually, sometimes it's just getting out of bed and taking a shower can sometimes be all that's needed, depending on how severe the kind of person with ME/CFS is.
Okay.
It turns out it's not just with ME/CFS. SARS-CoV-2, some people don't recover from that and they get long COVID. And one of the key symptoms of long COVID, which affects about 6 to 7% of the US population, is post-exertional malaise. So it's not an uncommon symptom anymore.
Yeah. So say that percentage again of long COVID. What number did you put on that?
Something like 6 to 7% of the population.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have heard really large numbers, but I haven't heard that large of a number. One of the other things that I'd found through my research was that with people who did get COVID, brain fog has been a really big side effect and or problem that people have, but I didn't realize. So maybe that's a combination of what you're talking about too. Like if 67% of the people have long COVID and they don't even know it, then that could cause all sorts of issues, right?
So neurocognitive issues, some people call it cognitive impairment. That's one of the key symptoms of ME/CFS, so one of the key symptoms of long COVID. And again, it's very possible that some of the kind of connections between the different hubs in the brain get disturbed by these kind of inflammation that occurs due to these viruses. Now, some people get the Epstein-Barr virus, causes mono, and they don't recover from mono. Some people get SARS-CoV-2, they get long COVID, they don't recover. So there's a certain thing called post-infectious illness. So there's a number of people who get an infection, a serious infection like we're talking about.
Yeah.
They just stay ill, they stay sick. And that's what we're talking about. What happens with these people, and not only that, but how we help them.
Yeah, that's amazing. So if you think about it, this is a really large number of people that because almost everybody on Earth got COVID at some point, right? I think some people may have escaped it, but most of us got some type of COVID. And so
the vast majority of people have either gotten COVID or gotten vaccinations. So
Right.
that basically, so yeah, what happened when people weren't vaccinated, the reactions people were having was much more severe. Today, the reactions are a little bit less because there's a little bit more immunity, either because people have had it in the past or because they've been vaccinated.
Wow, so that is really intriguing. That if 67% of them have a problem, and they probably a really large majority of those people don't realize they have a problem, that then we can help them with. And maybe that's why I'm seeing such a really large rise in people with pain and with people with fatigue and just energy. So it might not be the whole ME/CFS, but it's still people that are just not feeling well and need help. So anyway, this is really fascinating to me that it's such a large number, and you're validating that. So
think about, we're talking about over 1 million people with ME/CFS, and but it's probably now much higher because of the long COVID. And
yeah, that's what I would think. That million number may be 10x or even more than that. If those numbers are true, at 67% of the people have it, then oh my gosh, then that number is really big.
So I think we're talking about 6 or 7%. But
oh, gotcha. Okay, sounds good. I thought you said 67%. That's what that was.
Yes,
my ears not. Okay, so but still 6 or 7% of a lot of people is a lot, right?
and even 1% is a lot of people with these types of debilitating illnesses.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. So I'll go modify that. We'll take the 67% out. We'll take 6 or 7%. That sounds much. The number's still really big. It's way
Yeah.
more than a million. You take 6% of the population, and they have that issue. That's a really big number, depending upon what number you want to come up with for the world's
Absolutely.
population. So it's huge. All right. So this is cool. So what got you into doing this practice? What got you into medicine in general or helping people?
I'm what's called a clinical psychologist, and I've been doing research and being a professor at DePaul University for many years.
Awesome.
And actually, in 1989, I got mono myself and had a difficult time recovering from it. And I felt that if I have experienced something like this, it might be worth me contributing to trying to understand why an infection can cause such debilitating effects. So I've been, from personal experience, I've been basically gotten into this area.
Very fun. Have you always been in Illinois?
Yeah, I grew up more in kind of the East Coast, New Jersey, but I went to Brandeis University as an undergraduate, had a chance to meet Abraham Maslow, kind of one of the founders of the humanistic psychology movement, and
Wow, very cool.
B.F. Skinner as well, and also got my degree at the University of Rochester, and then came to DePaul University. And I've been at DePaul University for the last 50 years.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I love the trajectory where you were, and then the fact that you had mono and just like, hey, maybe this is something I need to help the world with, is a really neat thing that you've done and are doing. So now fast forward to post-COVID era, and you're doing a lot of research on ME/CFS still, right? And what are some of the fun things that you're working on and things that really excite you about what's going on in the world today?
So for about the last 8 or 9 years, I've been working with a colleague of mine at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago named Dr. Ben Katz. And we've been working on a prospective longitudinal study of people who came into college and got mono. Mono is something frequently people get. So we basically tracked over 4,500 students.
Wow.
With blood samples and self-report questionnaires. Then about 5% got mono, which is caused by the Epstein-Barr virus. And then we followed them over time to see which ones recovered and which ones didn't. And we've been trying to understand some of the pre-illness characteristics. Are there some things that might predispose certain people from getting a viral attack and recovering versus not recovering? So certainly this is something that we're now adding long COVID to our agenda, because there's a lot of people that also have long COVID and that have had debilitating effects. So long COVID, not everyone with long COVID has ME/CFS, but certainly a percentage of people do, and that's important for us to understand those with long COVID who have the severe condition, which is ME/CFS, versus long COVID but might not have all the other characteristics of ME/CFS.
Right. Wow. This is then. So what's the plan with that study? Is there a point where you're going to end the study and publish results? Are you publishing results throughout the study, or what? Explain that to me a little bit.
Yeah, we are basically publishing results on things from the questionnaires as well as the blood samples, the serum, and we're looking at pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory markers in the participants. We're looking at just a variety of different kind of biological patterns. Just think about yourself. If you get a cut, you want your immune system to help you, and it's called pro-inflammatory. So those types of cytokines or proteins try to help that kind of cut mend. But then at a certain point of that pro-inflammatory phase, you want it to calm down because it's done its work, and you want it to be anti-inflammatory. So in a sense, there's got to be a balance between the pro-inflammatory and the anti-inflammatory. And we find among patients with both ME/CFS and long COVID, they seem to have a kind of a inflammatory system going on. So it doesn't shut off. So they've gotten a virus that's attacked them, and something has happened that has now made them in some ways sick. And we think some of that has to do with chronic inflammation, which can affect organs throughout the body.
Right. Yeah, I was literally talking to another practitioner a few weeks ago, and she mentioned that really the source of all disease is inflammation, and which I thought was really fascinating, because then you start thinking about that. And if you look at what you're talking about with ME/CFS, that it's one of the key components of that is inflammation, and it's a bad inflammation in respect that it won't resolve itself. So your body's still inflamed, which is causing all these other issues. So I guess the big question is, how do we help people, and how do you diagnose that, or how does a practitioner diagnose that? And then how do you help their body learn the pro-inflammation versus the bad inflammation, right? Or the sustained inflammation.
So people who are scientists are trying to find out what are the mechanisms. So if we can find the mechanism that's causing these irregularities and problems, we can then possibly help people better. And one of the mechanisms might be tryptophan, which is something you get when you eat, and some of that goes to serotonin, which is a mood regulator.
Right.
But what might be happening is you've got low levels of serotonin in these patients, so there's a kind of mood issue that occurs. But you also have something called this KP pathway that seems to have irregularities that ends up giving you the energy. And if there's some metabolites that are producing harm, this is something that one of our colleagues that we're working with is trying to understand the mechanisms. But if you want to say, okay, what do we do with people who are now sick? Mm-hmm. And that's the reality is, if you look at primary care, physicians in this country, Canada, other places, pain and fatigue is one of the most common reasons people come into their primary care, as you well know. 20-25% of their patients complain of these types of symptoms that are basically unexplained. Often primary care folks just say, this must be, they're depressed, there must be something psychogenic. It's really not a biological problem. And that's not good, because then people aren't getting the specific types of remedies.
Right. Yeah. If they misdiagnose the first time, then they're not going to go down the right path to help them to recovery.
So proper diagnosis is really a key thing for people. And we've developed a scale called the DePaul Symptom Questionnaire that helps develop or determine whether a person might meet the symptom criteria for this illness.
Nice.
That's one thing that we have done, and that's being used really by research folks around the world right at this time. But then
are you getting that out into practitioners' offices as well, or how does that work in the medical? So you've developed this great questionnaire that helps people refine who they're talking to, what the potential problems could be. How do you get that out to people?
We've developed an algorithm, put it on the website so that you can take a screen, which is 4 questions. Okay. And then after that, you can take a short form. And if you seem like positive, you can then take the long form. So we've actually computerized it all and made it available so anyone can use it. So to help with diagnosis. So that's what we do. We do basic research and we give it away.
Nice. That's fantastic. So we can, I want to make sure that we have the link to that, because I think it'd be fascinating for people to go have a place where they can go pre-diagnose themselves. I'm really a big advocate nowadays for the practitioners are awesome, but I think people need to take care of their own health and make sure that they're their own advocate. And if they can have access to it and they can self-identify, oh, maybe it's this. Then when they go talk to the practitioner, they're having a better conversation.
But in terms of what can practitioners do?
Yeah.
And they say a lot of conditions are unexplained. Back pain, about 80% of it is unexplained. Some of the pain that you've talked about is unexplained.
Right.
That doesn't mean you can't help people. Even if you don't know the mechanisms, the reason for it, there's lots of stuff we can do with people with fatigue, pain, ME/CFS, long COVID. And I would focus on 4 things. that you might want to do if you're a practitioner. One is, I think you've got to think about the diet you're eating. And if you're on a junk food diet, typical American diet, where
You're in
you got
trouble.
high fat, kind of high salt, high sugar, this isn't the fuel that's going to basically make your body healthier and be able to fight off infection or get kind of, in a sense, balance between this hyper and lower immune response.
Amen.
So
Amen.
there's lots of good diets, but if you really want to look at it, the more unprocessed food you can eat, the more healthy food you can eat, good vegetables, and there's lots of ways of learning about nutrition, and that's something any patient or healthcare provider can study and recognize that there's lots of good diets, and getting a person on a good diet is important.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, yeah, go on.
Leonard, yeah, I love that conversation because I think it's just very important. People need to pause and think about that just themselves, even not even the practitioner. We need to get the practitioners to learn it because they weren't trained on it in medical school, right? The doctors that I've talked to, in their 10, 12 years of schooling, they got 8 hours worth of nutritional advice. And that advice was probably not very accurate back then. If we look at the pyramid that they put together, it's just wrong, right? The pyramid is not the right way to have nutrition. And what you mentioned about ultra processed food, I just want to also just iterate to people that 70% of our food in the United States is ultra processed food, which it does not have the nutrients you need in your foods. Start eating whole foods and get on a whole food diet. And literally there's multiple things, like you mentioned, multiple types of diets that are very helpful. But if you just start giving your body what it needs naturally, it can start healing the way, I'm a believer in God, and I believe that God created this amazing body and it will heal itself. Like you were mentioning with the cut, it's designed to go heal itself. So let's let people understand how important nutrition is. And so I'm excited that you mentioned that as the first item, because that is so essential, right? If we give our body nutrients, then it can process it right. And most people just are not doing that step well. So let's educate the doctors on that same thing. Let's get them in it. So fantastic. I love the first one. Sorry to interject, but I wanted to support you in that. I love it.
Very, very important. And again, our medical schools could certainly do a better job of preparing kind of healthcare practitioners and how to really support a patient.
Yeah.
It's not the doctor or healthcare provider telling the person what to do. It's collaborating with them.
Yeah, I love it.
They can work together on developing the healthy plan. So the second thing, one of the epidemics we have besides, which certainly SARS-CoV-2 and COVID is an epidemic of loneliness. There's a tremendous number of people who feel very disconnected, and that's unfortunate. And in terms of a risk factor, smoking is a risk factor for later death. Loneliness is the same amount as basically tobacco.
Wow, that's a really big number too. That's incredible.
So we got to think about people when you get a chronic illness like ME/CFS or long COVID. Sometimes you can no longer work. Sometimes you can no longer participate in some of the child rearing features. Sometimes you can't participate dealing with your friends and associates. So it's very easy to get isolated. And that's not a good thing, because we need to have people. We need to have regular contact with people. So developing the social support system, whether it's with family members, with friends, with other associates, very critical to have that group that you basically have regular contact with. That's critical for anybody, but particularly those who have, I think, these types of chronic illnesses.
Yeah, that's really intriguing. So what's the third one?
The third piece is when you wake up in the morning, you have something to do. Is there a coherence? Is there a purpose? Everyone needs to have a purpose, and everyone could have a different one, but It's got to be something, whether you want to wake up so that you can do some painting, or whether you want to wake up so that you can do some meditation, or whether you want to have a good breakfast, or whether you want to have a good conversation, whatever it is, whether you have a hobby, or you want to listen to classical music, or you have to do some shopping, whatever it is. If you've got something that you get up in the morning, you say, I've got something to do, that is critical for all of us. Nobody is ready to just, in a sense, do nothing all day. It's not healthy.
Yeah, that
But
makes
it's possible if you got severe fatigue and you got severe post-exertional malaise, that can get you to the point where you want to limit everything. And that's probably what you want to do is develop things that you love to do and develop them, whatever they are, as
I
long as
like
they're
that.
not hurting anybody else.
Yeah, there you go. I like it. The first one was nutrition, right? Getting the right nutrients your body needs. The second one is one of the big problems is loneliness. So let's make sure that the loved ones that we do know and care for, and our neighbors, that we don't let them be lonely. And then the third one is purpose, right? I think it is, and I would say hope as well. Combined with that is we need to give people hope, right? That they can get better and that they have a purpose that they can do things. So I love those first three items. That's fantastic. What about the fourth? You ready for that one?
Ready for it. So the fourth is really activity. Everyone has to do activity. You don't want to get deconditioned. The problem is in the MECFS area, they developed something in Great Britain called cognitive behavior therapy for people with MECFS. And they basically developed a model saying that the person has a phobic reaction toward activity. So they've gotten sick with a flu or something, or kind of monoglandular fever, they call it in Great Britain. And then basically they become very nervous and worried about any activity, and they become phobic toward doing anything, and then they become deconditioned. That's there's by the way, there's not support for that model. But then they say the method is to get the people to just keep developing more activity through exercise, and basically to keep pushing oneself regardless of symptoms. If you have symptoms, you basically push yourself until you basically work your way out of the problem. The patient community in the MECFS area, long COVID area, has had significant problems with that particular remedy. And in the 1990s, I developed something called energy model. Stay within your energy envelope. It's called
Nice.
pacing. And that means you have a certain amount of perceived energy and expended energy. And when you were healthy, you could perceive, say, 100, and you had expended 100. So you had a battery of 100. Well, you could do enough for 100, maybe even more for marathon, but you stayed within that battery.
Right.
Your battery is about 20.
Oh,
20% of what you once had, then your available energy is much less. Your perceived energy is much less. So your expended energy needs to stay within that battery, that energy envelope.
Got it.
And if you can do that, ultimately, you're not going to be putting more pressure and strain on the battery, which allow the battery to slowly get a little bit stronger. So pacing, staying within the energy envelope, involves activity that basically helps the person stay active, but not too active that basically they get sick with, for example, post-exertional malaise.
Gotcha. So instead of going backwards, they can start gradually increasing their energy level by staying within your own envelope. As you mentioned, I love that concept because I think that is really an important issue. When the health, I'm a very active person and I love to work out. I run a couple days a week, 2 or 3 days a week, and I lift weights 2 or 3 days a week. But then when I get a major injury, then all that backs off. So I was at 100, like you said, and now maybe when I have an injury or an illness, now my energy level's only at 50. And if I go try to do 60%, then I'm actually going down. My envelope is decreasing rather than getting it stronger and getting back up to my potential. So I think that's a great concept that we need to help educate people on, is just stay within your energy window, but make sure you get close to that energy window so you're actually doing something. So the worst thing is just to be staying sedentary and not doing anything, and then your window is going to just keep shrinking to where you're going to have no energy burn. So I love it. Let's take our envelopes and let's fill up our envelope, and then let's increase our envelope over time. Yep. That's a fantastic concept. I'm glad you came up with that. It makes a lot of logical sense, and I think if people can help themselves with those first four issues, and or help your loved ones with those four issues, people can make a dramatic change in their life just by doing that. And then maybe even educating their practitioner on, hey, here's the four things I learned from Leonard. Why don't you help me with these, and how can we help get well?
There's some research on, it's called the blue zones, where they've gone to different areas of the world, and they've said, where do people live longer and healthier? And in those particular areas, they have found that these four things, although they vary in each of those regions, these are some of the factors that account for kind of health into one's kind of elder years.
Yes, I love that. In fact, one of the things I remember from the Blue Zone studies, they live in areas where they need to walk typically, and it's actually uphill, or at least it's on a slope of some type, at least the ones that are the most healthy, because one, they got to get out and physically walk and do something, and then just the strain on going up a hill and then down a hill makes your body work a little bit harder. And those people are much more healthy than us Americans like me, sitting at my desk, looking at a computer, doing nothing, right? Moral of the story is to get outside and get some of that God-given sun on your body and get at least some walking in. Almost all of us can walk, and at least you can start filling up that energy envelope and start getting well. Dr. Leonard, this has been fascinating. Is there anything else you'd like to make sure that we cover on our conversation today that I didn't ask you?
I think these are the important issues. We need to have research that will help us find some of the explanations for these types of unexplained illnesses.
Yeah.
Because if we can understand what's going on with these unexplained illnesses, we will revolutionize medicine.
Amen. I love that. I'm so thankful for people like you, Leonard. I just really appreciate you dedicating your life to helping people and doing all the research and then publishing the research and then helping other people like the practitioners use your questionnaire to help them identify problems so they diagnose it early on. So I would love to make sure that I have those links at the bottom of this episode. People can find those. But how else can they communicate with you, Doc?
Sure. If people have questions, they can certainly email me at ljason@depaul.edu.
Fantastic. So I'll make sure we include that in the show notes as well. But man, Dr. Leonard Jason, thank you, of DePaul University. What an amazing institution. And just thank you for being our guest today on the I Am Pain Free podcast.
Thank you so much, Rob.
All right. God bless. We'll talk soon. Sign
Okay.
off on the I Am Pain Free podcast. As many of you know, my focus at the I Am Pain Free podcast is help as many people get pain free as possible. And we strive to use all natural and alternative therapies to accomplish that goal. Well, today I'm thrilled to introduce to you a revolutionary product that aligns perfectly with our mission of natural health and well-being. It's called Exodus by Exodus Strong. At Exodus Strong, their mission is to help you break free from the grip of big pharma and embrace natural solutions that promote vibrant health. With a foundation rooted in the wisdom of the Bible, the all-natural supplement harnesses the power of 7 key ingredients specifically mentioned in the scriptures. The flagship product, Exodus, is designed to be transformational, providing benefits such as energy enhancement, stress relief, blood sugar stabilization, pain relief, and anti-inflammation. So join the movement, right, to help them get 1 million new people to read the Bible every day and transform their health naturally. When you purchase Exodus, use code IAPF at checkout to receive a special free gift with your order. It's time to exit the old you and step into a new chapter of vitality and well-being. To get there, you go to exodusstrong.com. So it's Exodus, EXODUS, and check out and use that IAPF for the I Am Pain Free podcast. And then you'll experience the benefits of the Exodus mineral blend. This mineral blend is amazing. It's got the molecular hydrogen generating formula that's backed by hundreds of scientific studies. So begin your journey feeling great and looking great. Don't miss the opportunity to take control of your health with the all natural way. So go check it out. I think you'll really enjoy it.